So, why in the world would anybody think that studying Christianity is important? And why would you want to know more about Christianity if you want to understand international politics? Well, stick around because we're going to talk about it. Hello and welcome back, everybody. This is the School of Faith. I'm Hutch and I am your host. And today we're going to try and answer a question, which is why in the world would anybody want to study Christianity, especially if you're not a Christian? And so I assume that most of the people that stumble across this channel are themselves Christians, but perhaps you're not and you're wondering why in the world should I bother learning about Christianity or the Apostles' Creed or any of the hot topics that the Christian church deals with or faces. And so I'm going to try and answer that question for you today. So let's talk for a little bit about the place of Christianity in the political realm. So there are two ways that we could come at this, and one of them is to look at the importance and place of Christianity in the history of the United States, a country that is founded by religious refugees. But another way to look at it would be by looking at international politics, shall we say. And in order to do that, I want to talk about Russia particularly. And so Russia obviously is at the forefront of a lot of the American consciousness right now, especially with all of the controversy over supposed Russian interference in the U.S. election in 2016 and whether or not President Trump colluded with the Russians. But even before that, we were seeing Russian international affairs kind of at the forefront of our international news here in the United States, particularly in 2005 and then again in 2014, 2015, particularly in relation to the Ukraine. And so why is it that Russia is so desirous to maintain its influence over Ukraine? Well, I want to try and answer that question, but given the way that this particular video is going to be tagged, before I do that, I also want to say at the outset, Привет моим русским друзьям. So greetings to my Russian friends if you guys are watching this. And I want to start by saying that I'm not advocating for any particular political position here. All right, I'm simply trying to describe what is and offer a explanation for that touches on some of the religious aspects. And so if you're looking for me to explain, why I'm for or against, Ukraine joining the EU or any of those things, you're in the wrong place. Okay? And if you'd like my opinion about that, you can feel free to email me at hutch@I'mNotGoingToAnswerThatQuestion.com. So, if you want to understand some of the pieces that are in play with the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, one of the pieces that you really cannot overlook is the place of religion. And if you want to understand the place of religion, you've got to understand a certain amount of religious history. And so we're going to start at a fairly remote point in history, and you're going to maybe wonder why, but stick with me and we'll get there, okay? So most people would place the fall of the Roman Empire in September of 476 AD, and that's when the city of Rome is sacked and supposedly the Roman Empire falls. I would quibble with that date in a pretty significant way. And so the reality is that only the western portion of the Roman Empire falls in September of 476. The Eastern Roman Empire survives, and survives in various degrees of strength and weakness all the way through May 29th of 1453, when Constantinople is sacked and decisively falls into the hands of the Ottoman Turks and the Ottoman Empire. However, if you rewind and you get to 988 AD, some significant things happen. Vladimir the Great, who is the Grand Prince of Kiev, converts to Orthodoxy in 988, and when he does, he winds up being married to a woman named Anna I am going to mess this name up, but we're going to try it anyway. It's Anna Porphyrogenita. She was the daughter of Emperor Romanus II of the Eastern Roman Empire. And so there is, at this very early date, a intermingling of the prince of the Kievan Rus and the daughter of the Byzantine Empire, though they certainly did not think of themselves as Byzantine. They saw themselves as Romans. And so then we move back forward. Constantinople falls in 1453, and the daughter of the last legitimate heir of the Eastern Empire, Zoe, later changes her name to Sophia. Sophia Paleologina marries Grand Prince Ivan III of Moscow in 1472. And these two things influence a view of Moscow as the third Rome. And that's really important. So there is a profound sense that Russia and the Russian Empire is, properly speaking, the inheritor of the Christian civilization that thrived in the Eastern Empire up to 1453. And so that's at least one piece of this puzzle. But more narrowly, we need to remember that the modern Russian state, as we understand it, really does trace its origins to Kievan Rus. And so we can see that, particularly in the celebrations that surrounded the baptism of Vladimir that were celebrated with Tsar Nicholas II during his reign. I think it's important also to note that Tsar Nicholas II was a profoundly pious Orthodox Christian, and who very much saw himself as as we might say, the emperor who is equal to the apostles, which is a Byzantine or Eastern Roman Empire sort of concept. And so there is this profound sense of Russian identity that's tied up with Christianity, particularly what we might broadly call Eastern Orthodoxy. And so there is a really significant sense in which the Russian identity is Orthodox, and that can't be overlooked. And so, for instance, just as there is a sort of foundation or basis of this that can be found really all the way back to the time of the Troubles, that ran from about 1598 to 1613. But specifically, you can see this in the reign of Tsar Nicholas I in 1825, where he attempts to build the Russian identity on the three legs of a tripod, we might say. And those three legs are orthodoxy, autocracy, and nationality, or we might say nationalism. And so the three legs that uphold the Russian state in the mind, or that uphold Russian identity, let's say, are, church, czar, and nation. Now, obviously, with the July crisis that begins in July 1914, there is the beginnings of the collapse of the Russian Empire that eventually, it reaches its fruition in the October Revolution of 1917 when the Bolsheviks come to power. Their power, though, is not really consolidated until 1922. But once that happens, once the Russian Empire falls, the Russian Orthodox Church falls into serious decline, and not because of something that was inherently wrong with Russian Orthodoxy, but because they faced massive repression and a great deal of persecution at the hands of the Soviets. Now, fast forward to the fall of the fall of the Soviet Union, 1991, 1992, and you see this renewed explosion of orthodoxy in Russia. And there is a very serious move afoot to revive the Russian national identity as it surrounds orthodoxy particularly. And so you can see that, for example, in the close relationship that Vladimir Putin has with the Patriarchate of Moscow and even the current Patriarch Kirill. Now, all of that comes into play when you look at the international incidents that have occurred between Russia and the Ukraine. And so one reason, though it is certainly not the only reason, that Russia wants to maintain Ukraine as part of its sphere of influence is because Kiev is the capital of Ukraine, but it really is also the spiritual heart of Russian national identity as Orthodox. And so that cannot be overlooked as a significant piece of this particular international situation. And so that is one good reason to study Christianity, and it's to help you understand modern events that are happening around you right now. These aren't just ancient history. Christianity continues to have a profound influence on our current day and age. And so that's a good reason for you to study Christianity. So I want to thank you all very much. God bless. Thank you so much, everyone who stuck around for the end of the video. If you guys are enjoying this content, please do subscribe to the channel. That way you can get notified whenever there's new content that's gone up. So thank you so much for sticking with me. And by the way, if you're one of my Russian friends who has hung around this long, I would like to say specifically to you, Spasibo za vashu dobratu. Thank you so much for your kindness. Never met a Russian I didn't like.